I'm Diana, 34 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I signed away everything I had to my soon-to-be ex-husband, the 5-bedroom house, both cars, the real estate company, all of it. My lawyer begged me not to do it. My mother-in-law smirked from the gallery seats. Brittany, my husband's 27-year-old mistress, actually took a selfie right there in the courtroom. And Vincent, the man I once thought I'd spend my life with, smiled like he just won the lottery. But that smile disappeared exactly 47 seconds later when his lawyer finished reading the final clause in our agreement. Before I tell you what happened, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And if you're watching right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back 3 years to the night I accidentally opened the wrong drawer in Vincent's office. 8 years of marriage. That's how long I spent building a life with Vincent Saunders. From the outside, we had everything. A sprawling colonial house in the suburbs of Houston with 5 bedrooms we didn't need. A Porsche Cayenne in the garage for him. A 12-year-old Honda Accord for me. Dinner parties where Vincent held court while I refilled wine glasses. The perfect American dream. If you squinted hard enough and didn't ask too many questions, Vincent controlled everything about our finances. "I'll handle the money, you handle the house," he told me on our honeymoon, and I, young, in love, desperate to avoid the kind of fights that destroyed my parents' marriage, agreed. Before Tyler was born, I was a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. I was good at it. Numbers made sense to me in a way people sometimes didn't. But when I got pregnant, Vincent sat me down with that reasonable tone he used when he'd already made a decision. "The baby needs his mother at home. I make enough for both of us." So I quit. Traded spreadsheets for sippy cups, client meetings for playdates, and when Tyler started kindergarten and I picked up part-time remote accounting work to keep my skills sharp, Vincent barely noticed. To him, I was furniture, useful, present, and utterly unremarkable. He'd check his Rolex Submariner, a gift to himself for closing some deal, and announce he had investor meetings that would run late. His home office stayed locked. The credit card statements went to his email. I had a supplementary card with a modest limit. Everything else was his domain. What I didn't know then, but would soon discover, was that his Rolex was bought on credit, and his empire was built on sand. Tyler changed everything for me. My son came into the world 6 years ago with his father's dark hair and my stubborn chin. And from the moment the nurse placed him in my arms, I understood a kind of love I'd never known existed. Fierce, unconditional, the kind that makes you lie awake at night wondering if you're doing enough, being enough. Vincent saw Tyler differently. Our son was a legacy, not a relationship. Something to mention at business dinners. My boy's already showing an interest in real estate. Can you believe it? But never something to nurture. Vincent missed Tyler's first steps because of a conference call. Missed his first word because he was traveling. Missed every single school play. Every parent-teacher conference. Every bedtime story. I remember one evening about a year ago. Tyler had been waiting by the window for 2 hours, his favorite picture book clutched against his chest. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home? He said he'd read to me tonight." I texted Vincent. No response. Called voicemail. Tyler fell asleep on the couch, still holding that book. When Vincent finally walked in at 11, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual, I asked if he'd forgotten his promise. He barely looked up from his phone. "I'm building a future for this family, Diana. Tyler will understand when he's older." But I saw my son's face the next morning when he realized Daddy had come and gone without even saying goodnight. That was the night I realized something had been wrong for longer than I wanted to admit. Vincent hadn't hugged Tyler in 3 months, hadn't asked about school, about friends, about anything. Our son wasn't a priority. He was an afterthought. The night I found out the truth, I wasn't even looking for it. 3 years ago, Tyler had a school field trip coming up, and I needed his passport for some reason I can't even remember now. Vincent usually kept our documents in his office, but that night he'd left for one of his late meetings and forgotten to lock the door. I found the passport easily enough. Top drawer, right where he said it would be, but as I pulled it out, my hand brushed against a folder I'd never seen before. The return address on the top envelope made me pause. First National Bank. Final notice, stamped in red. My accountant's brain kicked in before my wife's heart could stop me. I opened it. 90 days past due. $340,000 outstanding on a commercial property loan. I opened another envelope. Wells Fargo. Delinquent account. Immediate action required. Then Chase. Then a letter from a collection agency I'd never heard of. By the time I finished going through that drawer, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer impossibility of what I was seeing. Vincent's empire was hemorrhaging money. The properties he bragged about at parties were underwater. The company that was supposed to be our retirement was drowning in debt, over $2 million, and he'd never said a word. I sat there in his leather chair for a long time. The papers spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I took out my phone, photographed every single document. Time-stamped, dated, crystal clear. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, turned off the light, and walked out. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was calculating. The next morning, I made a phone call to someone I trusted more than anyone, my college roommate, Rachel Morrison. Rachel worked at a regional bank. We'd stayed close over the years, the kind of friendship that picked up right where it left off, no matter how long between conversations. She was also the only person who'd ever looked at Vincent and said, "I don't know, Di. Something about him feels off." I should have listened to her then. I was listening now. I need to run a credit check, I told her, on myself, and I need to understand what debts might be attached to my name as a spouse. Rachel didn't ask why. She just said, "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring your ID." What I learned over the following weeks confirmed my worst fears and revealed something unexpected. Most of the debt was in Vincent's name alone, or tied to his company. But he'd taken out 2 loans using both our names without my knowledge, forged my signature, or used an electronic version I'd never authorized. "This is fraud," Rachel said quietly, showing me the paperwork. "You could report him." "Not yet." I folded the copies she'd made and slipped them into my purse. I need to know the full picture first, and so began my 3-year education in financial survival. I opened a savings account at a different bank, one Vincent had no connection to. Every month, I funneled what I could from my part-time work. 200 here, 300 there. I documented everything, saved every email, every statement, every scrap of evidence that crossed my path. Rachel checked in periodically with updates. "The debt's growing, Diana, not shrinking." I wasn't surprised, but I was ready. Vincent had no idea his wife was watching and waiting. A year ago, Vincent started coming home smelling like someone else. It wasn't obvious at first. A hint of perfume that wasn't mine, a text notification he'd silenced too quickly, business trips that seemed to multiply overnight. But I'd spent 3 years training myself to notice everything, and Vincent had grown careless with a wife he considered beneath his attention. The late nights became later, the investor dinners more frequent. He upgraded his wardrobe. $3,000 Tom Ford suits charged to credit cards that were already maxed, while I still wore dresses from 5 years ago. "You should put more effort into your appearance," he told me one evening, adjusting his new silk tie in the hallway mirror. "Brittany, she's a new business associate. She always looks put together. Professional women understand the importance of presentation." "Brittany, the name," he said too casually, too often. I didn't confront him. What would be the point? I already knew our marriage was a facade. I just needed to know how long I had before the facade crumbled completely. One night, Vincent left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. The screen lit up. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear the blue tie. I like Exobe." I didn't touch the phone. Didn't need to. The preview told me everything. That same week, I noticed him deleting his browsing history, changing passwords, making calls from the garage where he thought I couldn't hear. But here's what Vincent never understood about me. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't consumed by jealousy or heartbreak. I'd made my peace with who he was long ago. I was simply gathering information, building my case, waiting for the moment when he would finally show his hand. That moment came sooner than I expected. The first time I met Brittany Lawson, she was wearing a knockoff Birkin bag and Vincent's arm around her waist. It was his mother's birthday dinner, a monthly ritual at Evelyn Saunders' pristine colonial in River Oaks, the kind of house where the silverware matched and the help knew to be invisible. I'd been attending these dinners for 8 years, always feeling like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. That night, Vincent walked in with Brittany like she belonged there. "Everyone, this is Brittany. She's been consulting on some new investment opportunities for the company." She was 27, all blonde highlights and practiced smiles. Her dress was designer, or designed to look designer. I'd spent enough years auditing luxury goods to spot the tells. The stitching on her bag was uneven, the hardware slightly off color, but no one else noticed. They were too busy fawning. Vincent finally found someone with ambition, Evelyn announced, squeezing Brittany's hands like she was welcoming a long-lost daughter. Then she glanced at me with that thin smile I'd grown accustomed to. Diana, be a dear and help Maria bring out the appetizers. I spent that dinner in the kitchen and the margins, watching my husband parade his mistress in front of his family while they pretended not to see what was obvious. Tyler sat beside me, confused. Mommy, who is that lady? Why is she sitting in your chair? She's nobody important, sweetheart. Brittany laughed at something Vincent said, her hand lingering on his sleeve. I watched Evelyn beam with approval, and I thought, the bag isn't the only fake thing at this table. But Brittany wasn't my enemy, she was a symptom. The real threat was the man she didn't know was already bankrupt in more ways than one. 6 months before the final hearing, Vincent sat me down at our dining table and delivered the news like he was announcing a quarterly earnings report. I want a divorce, no preamble, no apology, just 5 words dropped between us like a contract termination. I'd known this was coming, had prepared for it, planned for it, almost welcomed it, but hearing him say it still felt like a door slamming shut on a decade of my life. I see, I said. What are you proposing? Vincent leaned back, his expression the same one he used when negotiating with people he considered beneath him. I want the house, the cars, the company, everything we built. I'll be keeping it. And what about me? He shrugged. You can keep Tyler. I'm not interested in custody battles. The kid would slow me down. The kid, our son. 6 years old, innocent, adoring, and his father couldn't even be bothered to use his name. You're sure? I kept my voice steady. You want everything? All the assets, all of them, every property, every account, every share. Vincent smiled, clearly pleased with his own generosity. I'm being reasonable here, Diana. Most men in my position would fight you for the child too, just to avoid support payments. I'm letting you walk away with something. Something? My son? Like Tyler was a consolation prize. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw exactly what he saw when he looked at me. Nothing worth fighting for. All right, I said quietly. I'll need some time to review everything. Vincent's eyebrows rose. He'd expected tears, maybe bargaining, not compliance. That's reasonable. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork. What he didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years, and I was ready. The first meeting with Vincent's lawyer happened in a corner office downtown. All glass walls and leather chairs designed to intimidate. Gerald Hoffman was a silver-haired partner at one of Houston's most aggressive family law firms, the kind of man who charged $600 an hour and looked at opposing parties like they were problems to be eliminated. Vincent had clearly chosen him for exactly that reason. I came alone, no lawyer, just me and my 5-year-old Blazer, sitting across from 2 men who clearly thought the meeting was a formality. Mrs. Saunders, Gerald began, sliding a thick folder across the table. My client has prepared a comprehensive proposal for the division of marital assets. Given the circumstances, we believe this is more than fair. I opened the folder. Pages of legalese detailing how Vincent would retain sole ownership of everything, the house, vehicles, investment accounts, and Saunders Properties LLC. In exchange, I would receive my personal belongings in custody of Tyler. No alimony, no portion of the business, nothing. Vincent watched me read with a satisfied smirk. She doesn't need a lawyer, he said to Gerald, not bothering to lower his voice. She's just a part-time bookkeeper. She wouldn't understand any of this, even if she tried. Gerald looked uncomfortable. Mr. Saunders, I really should advise that your wife retain independent counsel. Not necessary. Vincent waved his hand dismissively. Diana knows I built everything. She contributed nothing. Right, Diana? I closed the folder and met his eyes. I'll need a few days to review this. Then I'll provide my response. Vincent blinked, clearly expecting immediate surrender. But he recovered quickly, that arrogant smile returning. Take all the time you need. The outcome won't change. I walked out of that office and I wasn't a victim. I was a woman with a plan. Within a week, Vincent had rewritten our entire marriage for public consumption. Diana's being completely unreasonable. I overheard him tell mutual friends at a neighborhood gathering I hadn't been invited to. I'm offering her a clean break, and she's trying to drag this out, probably hoping to take half my company when she never worked a day for it. The whisper network moved fast. People I'd known for years suddenly stopped returning calls. A mom from Tyler's school gave me a sympathetic look and said, I heard about everything. It must be so hard realizing you weren't compatible. Compatible, as if I was the one caught with a 27-year-old mistress. Then came Evelyn's call. Diana, her voice carried that particular frost she reserved for people who disappointed her. I understand you're making this difficult for Vincent. May I remind you that my son built that company from nothing? You were lucky to live in that house, drive those cars, wear the lifestyle he provided. Don't embarrass yourself by pretending you deserve more. I haven't asked for anything, Evelyn. Good. Keep it that way and don't drag this through the courts. It would be humiliating for everyone, especially Tyler. She hung up before I could respond. That same night, I discovered something while reviewing the property records I'd been quietly collecting. Vincent had mortgaged our family home, the house we lived in, without my consent or signature. A second mortgage taken out 18 months ago. Under Texas law, he needed my approval for that. He didn't have it. I photographed the document, added it to my file, and felt something settle in my chest. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I was beaten. The people who underestimate you always leave the biggest blind spots. Rachel was the one who found Margaret Collins. She's handled some of the ugliest divorces in Houston, Rachel told me over coffee at a cafe far from our usual spots. And she wins, not because she's ruthless, because she's thorough. Margaret's office was nothing like Gerald Hoffman's glass tower. It occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian near Montreux, all warm wood and framed credentials. She was in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that assessed me the moment I walked through her door. Sit down, Mrs. Saunders. Tell me everything. So I did. 3 years of documentation, the debt, the forged signatures, the affair, Vincent's demands, the social pressure. All of it laid out on her desk in organized folders I'd prepared myself. Margaret reviewed each piece methodically, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When she finished, she looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. You've done remarkable work here. Most clients come to me in crisis. You've come prepared for war. I'm not interested in war, I said. I'm interested in freedom. Then let me tell you what your options are. She set down her pen. Based on what you've shown me, you could fight for half of everything. Texas is a community property state. You have grounds, half of $4.7 million in debt. Margaret smiled. The first real smile she'd shown. You understand the situation better than your husband does. I've had 3 years to understand it. He still thinks he's a millionaire. Then let me ask you something. She leaned forward. What do you actually want out of this divorce? I thought about Tyler, about my savings account, about starting over with nothing but my son and my dignity. I want him to get exactly what he's asking for. Margaret studied me for a long moment, then pulled a thick legal textbook from her shelf. Under Texas law, when marital assets are divided in a divorce, the debts attached to those assets can be assigned as well. It's called a liability assumption clause. She opened to a marked page. If one party agrees to take ownership of an asset, they can also be required to assume full responsibility for any liens, mortgages, or debts associated with it. So, if Vincent wants everything, then Vincent gets everything, including the $4.7 million in liabilities currently attached to those assets. Margaret's pen traced a line in her notes. The key is ensuring the agreement is explicit and legally binding, and that he signs it voluntarily with full knowledge of what he's agreeing to. He won't read it carefully, I said. He never does. He already thinks he is one. That's his choice. Margaret closed the book. But we need to protect you legally. There's a document called a waiver of independent review. Essentially, he'll be acknowledging that he had the opportunity to have everything examined by financial experts and chose not to. His lawyer will tell him to get an independent audit. Almost certainly. But will Vincent listen? I thought about my husband, his ego, his certainty, his absolute conviction that he was the smartest person in any room. No, he won't. Then here's what we do. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad. We draft an agreement that gives him exactly what he's demanded. The house, the cars, the company, all of it. We include the liability assumption clause on page 47 of a 52-page document, and we wait for him to sign away his own future, and if he reads it, then you're no worse off than you were before. She met my eyes, but I don't think he will. Neither did I. The pressure came from multiple directions at once. Brittany called me first. Actually called, not texted, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Diana, hi. I know this is awkward, but I just wanted to reach out woman to woman. She paused for effect. Vincent and I are looking at some properties together, and the financing is getting complicated because of the divorce timeline. If you could just speed things along, it would make everything so much easier. Speed things along, I repeated. You know how it is. We want to start our new chapter, and you're probably ready to move on too, right? It's better for everyone if we can just wrap this up quickly. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. I'll take that under consideration, Brittany. Then Vincent weighed in via email, always documenting himself, never aware of how those words might look later. Diana, my patience is running thin. If you don't sign within 2 weeks, I'll file a motion claiming deliberate delay. Gerald says I have grounds. Don't make this ugly. The threats continued. His lawyer sent formal letters. His mother left voicemails. Even acquaintances started reaching out with helpful advice about accepting reality. But buried in Brittany's phone call was something she probably shouldn't have mentioned. The financing is getting complicated, which meant Vincent needed assets on paper to secure new loans. He was planning to leverage the very properties that were already drowning in debt, probably to fund his new life with Brittany. He wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. I showed the email to Margaret. He's signing a waiver with this kind of documented pressure. She almost laughed. Diana, your husband is building our case for us. I just smiled. Let him keep pushing. Every threat was another nail in his own coffin. The family meeting was Evelyn's idea. Naturally. We should settle this like civilized people, she announced, summoning us all to her River Oaks dining room, the one with the Waterford crystal chandelier and the mahogany table that had witnessed 30 years of Saunders family power plays. Vincent sat at the head of the table, Evelyn to his right, a few cousins and an uncle scattered along the sides like a jury. I was placed at the far end, physically marginalized, exactly where they wanted me. Diana has agreed to accept Vincent's terms. Evelyn began, not bothering to let me speak for myself. She'll sign the papers this week, and we can all move forward from this unfortunate situation. Vincent smiled magnanimously. I always knew she'd come around. Diana understands she wasn't really equipped for this kind of negotiation. The cousins nodded. The uncle cleared his throat approvingly. I sat with my hands folded, saying nothing. We should acknowledge that Vincent is being extremely generous here, Evelyn continued. He's letting Diana keep Tyler, even though, she waved her hand vaguely. A boy needs his father. Traditionally speaking, Tyler is my priority, I said quietly. I just want what's best for him. Then sign the papers, Vincent said. Stop dragging this out. I looked down at my hands, performing the defeated wife they expected to see. You're right, I'll sign. I only wanted to make sure I understood everything. Evelyn beamed. Finally, some sense. You see, Vincent? I told you she'd come around once she realized she had no other choice. Across the room, I caught Tyler watching from the doorway where the nanny was supposed to keep him occupied. His small face was confused, worried. I smiled at him gently. What nobody in that room understood was that I hadn't surrendered. I just made them think I had. The night before the final hearing, I sat alone in the tiny apartment I'd rented after moving out of the house. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. A galley kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand side by side. But it was clean, it was safe, and it was ours. Mine and Tyler's. My son had fallen asleep an hour earlier, his favorite stuffed elephant tucked under his arm. I watched him breathe for a few minutes. This small person who had become the center of my entire universe. Then walked to the kitchen table where my documents were spread out. 3 years of preparation, all of it leading to tomorrow. I reviewed the final agreement one more time. 52 pages. The liability assumption clause buried on page 47, exactly as Margaret and I had planned. The waiver of independent financial review on page 49. Everything legal, everything transparent for anyone who bothered to look. Vincent wouldn't look, I was certain of it, but certainty and reality are different things. And my hands trembled slightly as I closed the folder. On the counter, I'd set out my outfit for tomorrow. A simple gray blazer. White blouse, minimal jewelry. The only piece that mattered was the ring my grandmother had left me. A thin gold band with a tiny sapphire worth nothing monetarily, but everything emotionally. It was the one asset Vincent had never thought to claim. Tyler stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about pancakes. I walked back to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, brushing hair from his forehead. Whatever happens tomorrow, I whispered, we're going to be okay. The words were meant for him, but maybe I needed to hear them too. I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I want to pause here for a moment if you don't mind. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I need to say something to anyone listening who might recognize pieces of their own story in mine. If you're in a relationship where you feel controlled, where someone else manages every dollar, makes every decision, treats you like you're invisible or incapable, I want you to know that you're not alone, and you're not crazy for feeling trapped. For 3 years, I stayed silent. Not because I accepted what was happening, but because I was building something in that silence. A plan, a safety net, a way out that no one could take from me. I'm not telling you my path is the right one for everyone. Every situation is different, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. And knowing your own worth doesn't require anyone else to see it. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. A friend, a sister, a coworker who's going through something similar. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that there are options, even when it feels like there aren't. Hit that like button if you want to help more people find this video. And if you're still here, still listening, comment and tell me. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove them wrong? I'll be reading every single response. Now back to the morning of the hearing. I dropped Tyler off at Rachel's house, kissed him goodbye, and drove to the courthouse in my old Honda Accord. The Porsche was already in the parking lot when I arrived. Vincent had gotten there early, eager to claim his prize. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The morning of January 3rd was unseasonably warm for Houston, 68 degrees, bright sun cutting through wispy clouds. I stood outside the family courthouse, watching my breath not fog in the air, feeling strangely calm. 3 years of waiting, and it had come down to this. One hearing, one signature, one moment that would determine the rest of my life. My phone buzzed. Margaret, in the building, room 4B, ready when you are. I texted back a simple coming and walked through the glass doors inside the courthouse, hummed with the mundane business of endings. Couples signing custody agreements, lawyers shuffling papers, clerks stamping documents that would reshape families forever. Just another Tuesday for everyone, except the people whose worlds were changing. I found room 4B at the end of a long hallway. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see Vincent already seated at the respondent's table, Gerald Hoffman beside him, both men reviewing papers with the relaxed posture of people who believed they'd already won. Margaret was waiting for me outside. How are you feeling? Ready? The word came out steady. Is everything in order? Every document filed, every clause triplicate checked. She touched my arm briefly. Unusual for her, but somehow exactly what I needed. Whatever happens in there, Diana, you should know. Win or lose, you've already proven you're not who they think you are. I'm not trying to prove anything. I met her eyes. I'm just trying to be free. She nodded once, then opened the door. Vincent looked up as I entered. He smiled, that confident, condescending smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Diana, glad you could make it. I took my seat beside Margaret without responding. Let him smile. It wouldn't last long. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, more intimate. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed faintly overhead, rows of gallery seating that were mostly empty. Mostly Brittany had claimed a spot in the front row, wearing a red designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was texting when I walked in, but looked up long enough to give me a smile that was almost pitying. Beside her sat Evelyn Saunders, immaculate in Chanel, her posture radiating the quiet certainty of a woman who had never been denied anything in her life. They'd come to witness Vincent's triumph, a front-row seat to my humiliation. I settled into my chair and watched my husband from across the aisle. He'd worn his best navy suit, a gold tie clip catching the light. The Rolex gleamed on his wrist. To anyone who didn't know better, he looked like a man in complete control. Gerald Hoffman leaned over to whisper something, and I caught fragments. Routine. Just need her signature.